Hey, welcome to the Black Pill. Today we're talking about how to make a decision whether to join someone's religion. I'm talking about it from my perspective, from where I'm sitting, uh, down on the floor, because there's a nice blank wall in case later I decide I need to put anything there. That's where I'm sitting. It hasn't happened in a while, but people used to try and sell me their religions like all the time. This community is a pretty religious one, and a standard greeting used to be, "Hi, my name is X. What's your name? Where do you go to church?" Right? The assumption that you go to church, and if you go to any church but that person's church, you're wrong about that, and so they'll try and talk you into their church. Hasn't happened in a while to me, but it's still going on out there. And so I just want to talk about when someone offers me the chance to participate in their religion, kind of the probability stuff that's going to go on in my head to make that decision. And for this, I'm going to borrow the concept of the Drake equation, not the equation itself, but the concept. And Drake was a dude who was interested in the question, is there intelligent life somewhere out there in the universe? How could we even begin to formulate a computation of that, right? Before any of the data points existed that could begin to fill in the question, he was conceptualizing what data points we would need, how to formulate that. So I'm going to say, if you say, "Hey Jason, you should join my religion," I'm going to go, "Should I join your religion?" And the probability is, the probability, the decision making framework is small g times big G times P2 times S times CA times CO times M. And here's what all those terms are gonna mean. Little g is the probability that a God exists. A God, any God. Is there such a thing as a God? We need to unpack that a little bit. It to the theist, it sounds like when I ask this question about the probability of God, right, there are two possibilities. God exists and God does not exist. Those are the possibilities. And I mean, a lot of theists can't even acknowledge the possibility to, at any level, even the abstract level, even the conceptual level. That's a problem of logic. It's the failure to take the hypotheticals seriously that makes moral reasoning impossible. But if we're going to approach this honestly, we have to acknowledge God could exist, God could not exist. And when we do that, it seems like it's a 50-50 proposition. There could be God, there could not be God. It's a coin toss. And I promise you, it's absolutely not a coin toss. It implies a bunch of other questions. Can the universe exist without a God? Can God exist outside the universe? Is outside of the universe a meaningful term? Because God would have to be outside the universe to create the universe, outside the world to create the world. And there just is no model of physics that requires God or is improved by the existence of God. This absolutely is not a 50-50 proposition. It's very, very improbable that God or gods exist in the way they're meant in religious terms. All right, so then big G is the probability that only that proposed God exists. Or if we're acknowledging that God breaks the universe, God breaks all knowledge, then if your God exists, we also have to accept that other gods might exist. And in that case, what's the probability that the God you are proposing is the one I should believe in? Right? That only it exists, or because other gods almost certainly exist if one God exists, then why yours in particular? Is yours superior? Are they the master of the other gods in some way? If God exists, then knowledge is fundamentally broken. Yeah. No means of achieving knowledge have any chance of success. If God exists the way that the biblical literalists are saying, then knowledge is a matter of authority. We should believe whatever we're told, whatever was written down 4,000 years ago in these holy books and only these holy books, and therefore knowledge is fundamentally broken. All of the things that we've learned with science are invalid. This sounds like an argument to consequence, and it is not. I mean, there are consequences here, and they are horrifying. We would live in the nightmare scenario proposed by Cixin Liu in the three-body problem. It's the end of physics, it's the end of science, and the reign of authority. And that is nightmarish. That means that all of the advances in human lifespan and quality of life amount to nothing. They're mere coincidences. The way we figured out how to broadcast information through the air doesn't hold any water. That's as likely to be God accepting our prayers that someone else hear a thing, or the devil manipulating us through the radio, as it is to be any fundamental understanding of how radio waves work. If God, no knowledge. Knowledge is fundamentally and completely broken, and all means of investigating the universe are fundamentally flawed. So that's a problem. That's a problem. And it's in particular a problem for your God in particular. The problem that only this one God exists, right? It destroys all of science if it's true. It destroys all of inquiry if it's true. And therefore, I can also propose any supreme being that I want. Right? In this case, if you posit capital G God, I can posit any number of improbable beings, like vampires and ghosts and spirits and aliens and gods bigger and smaller than your God and the God that created the universe outside the universe where your God exists. And we are on exactly equal logical footing in our pronouncements. So your flying spaghetti monster and your space crab, the giant lobster behind Venus and whatever, literally anything goes at this point. Okay? So the probability, small g, that any God exists, that's already in trouble. And the probability that only God, big G, exists, that's very much in trouble. And then you'd have small p. Right? The probability that the supreme God that exists, the big G God exists, the probability that that is your God in particular. Accepting the possibility of a local big G God, a supreme God, is your God in particular, the one described in your religion, the one that can do us favors? Are they the one we should be devoting ourselves to? Or is their power in some way limited by the other deities? Would an appeal to some different deity be more moral or more pragmatic? Because joining a religion is not merely a matter of scientific probability, is it? It's a matter of whether joining that religion would have benefits for the individual. And those benefits might be immediate in this life. They might be in some posited future life. Or it might be merely right to do it. And now you're positing moral law, like natural law. That's a whole different set of problems that is implied here. But if it's moral to appeal to your God, could it be more moral to appeal to a different God? P2, the probability that your religion accurately describes and understands that God. That is, the God of your particular religious text is the supreme God. That doesn't necessarily mean that the accounts of that supreme God are necessarily accurate in every detail, especially when the accounts of those gods in the religious texts are inconsistent. They're logically inconsistent. Therefore, they cannot always infallibly describe that being. They're incomplete in some way. Are the accounts in your religious book sufficiently accurate or merely glimpses through a broken fence? By that I mean this quote from Frank Herbert, which I'm going to read verbatim. There was a man who sat each day looking out through a narrow vertical opening where a single board had been removed from a tall wooden fence. Each day, a wild ass of the desert passed outside the fence and across the narrow opening. First the nose, then the head, then the forelegs, the long brown back, the hind legs, and lastly the tail. One day the man leaped to his feet with the light of discovery in his eyes, and he shouted for all who could hear him, "It is obvious. The nose causes the tail." Believing in your religion, do I therefore believe true things about the God in the universe? And are those beliefs moral and pragmatic? Then we move to little s. Little s is the probability that God can be swayed. Does God listen to prayers? Does it listen to appeals from saints or sub-deities who offer intercession? Are the procedures for obtaining that attention and benevolence, either from God or those intercessionary beings, are they accurately described in your religion? How could we know that? CA would be caring, the probability that particular God described in your particular faith cares about my individual activities and beliefs. What are the odds? What are the odds, and how could you even begin to calculate them? Does God, big G God, sufficiently care about me that it has devised rewards and punishments for me as I navigate life or eternity? Debates don't lead to truth. They're fun to watch sometimes, mostly for people who have skin in the game, who definitively believe one way or another in the issue, and then you like to watch your guy scoring points, all right? And so here's an atheist guy scoring points, George Carlin. So you believe there's a man in the sky with a long white beard who knows everything about everything in the universe, who created everything and has infinite power. And they love us, they love me in particular, unconditionally, but they care whether I masturbate. They watch me masturbate. And if I do, then because they love me, there's a fiery lava pit into which they will cast my soul to punish me for all of eternity. What are the chances that some infinitely large being, larger than the universe, cares about my individual beliefs, attitudes, and activities? What are the odds it's harmed by me? Does God sufficiently care that it has devised rewards and punishments to keep me on the straight and narrow as I navigate through life, or indeed through eternity? CO, for consequences, the probability that the rewards and punishments are more important than the life I could live without adopting the offered religion, that religion in particular. Does God, for example, have planned the nastiest possible afterlife for unbelievers and the best possible one for believers? Is it pragmatic to delay gratification in this life, even the basic gratification of essential freedom, for the uncertain promise of a future life? If so, small m, is it moral to attend to the consequences of belief versus unbelief? Should we allow ourselves to make moral decisions at the Bronze Age level, the lowest of Kohlberg's stages of morality? Should we decide our faith on pragmatic reasons of reward and punishment? So that's the whole thing. Here, I wrote it down. Little g, big G, P, P2, S, C, A, C, O, M. What are you left with? I don't know. I don't know. But I'm almost certainly not left with the probability that joining your religion in particular would be good. Like the Drake equation, when it was first proposed, there just isn't a way to really fill in any of these terms. In order to join your religion, I would really have to fill in all of the terms, and all of those terms would have to come out favorably. Unlike the Drake equation, there is likely no way to even begin to fill in the terms empirically or logically, because no amount of advanced instrumentation or theory can solve abstract problems like what is moral? Or do incomprehensible entities exist outside of our ability to detect them? You know, Drake was talking about how many galaxies exist and how many stars are in each galaxy and how many planets around each star and how many in the Goldilocks zone and so forth. And that is stuff for which we can develop instrumentation. Some of those numbers are starting to come in where we can loosely plug in figures. And for God, no. If you have a very certain answer to any of these terms, you're just wrong. I mean, you might be right by chance. There just isn't a logical or empirical way to answer these kinds of questions. And the worst possible answer is the solution is 100%. You should 100% join my religion because I read the Bible and therefore God is real. Worst possible answer. That's the failure to take the hypothetical seriously. You're not even engaging with the problem. Don't waste my time. Atheism. I'm not an atheist. There just isn't a God to not believe in. There's not any persuasive evidence that there is a God to believe in. And therefore there isn't a God to believe in. There's no rational way to talk about it. It's not even a rational question. Some people identify as atheists. Go ahead, have a good time. You're fine. You can identify however you want. You can describe yourself however you want to. It's fine. Stay in control of it. Some people identify others as atheists, then define what atheist means in an unfavorable light. For example, as someone who is angry at God and therefore denies belief in God. This is like the God's Not Dead film franchise. It's really evangelical Christians smugly proclaiming that everyone who doesn't believe what they believe um, does actually believe what they believe. Mm-hmm. But they're just mad because God gave their wife cancer or something. They're not satisfied with their lives. And if they were faithful enough, they would be satisfied with their lives, right? So God's not dead, the evil philosophy professor who asks questions. He does more than that in the film. He really is evil, telling people they must believe God is dead. First of all, that's not a belief that there's no God. That's a belief that there was a God, God was alive, and then God died. Um, it's all nonsense, start to finish, complete nonsense. And any college professor who insisted that in order to pass their class, they had to prove something unprovable, or they had to share the professor's religious beliefs, that person would be immediately fired. Even if they had tenure, like the whole college board would meet and they would toss that person would be ejected from the university so fast they get friction burns on their buttocks skipping across the parking lot. You know what I mean? Total nonsense. Total nonsense. Um, so that's people defining atheists in a way that's very unfavorable so they can win some rhetorical argument in their head. And historically, of course, the atheist was the person who believed in the wrong God. You know, if we're Romans together and we have our Roman pantheon and you believe in the God of Jesus, then you're an atheist because you don't believe in my gods. I could equally say that evangelists are atheists. You know, if we're all free to massage words so that they just make whatever argument we're trying to make, I can say evangelists are atheists. Their belief in God seems to be so weak, they need validation by being joined by other people. That is, your belief seems to depend on my belief. Why are you trying so hard to convert me to your particular faith? It's as if your belief is no good unless everyone else believes it, and therefore you don't believe it very strongly. Right? The term atheist is dependent on who's saying it. And when a believer says it, what they seem to mean is there is a God and you don't believe in him. But that's wrong. There almost certainly is no God to not believe in. So I'm not an atheist. The agnostic prefers to hedge their bets a little bit. The issue of God in the abstract, the first term in the equation, just isn't testable. It's not falsifiable. There's no procedure we could do that would prove there's no God. There are lots of procedures we can do that prove your religion is false. But there's not one we can do about the first of the terms in the equation. And as a scientist, I mean, that's just not interesting. Things that I can't prove false, at least in principle, just aren't interesting. Ideas that can be proposed without evidence can be dismissed without evidence, and so my inclination is just to dismiss it. But the agnostic is going to say, there is a possibility it's true, I accept the possibility, and therefore I have uncertainty. And honestly, I do. I maintain the littlest bit of uncertainty. It is possible there's a God. It's not 50-50, but there's a possibility. There's a possibility that I'm wrong. But there's a next step here that the theists, that the religious conversion people take. And that makes me defensive and just go, nope, no God, no possibility of God, leave me alone. And it's the argument to aliens. Right? Theists try to exploit that little bit of uncertainty with the appeal to ignorance. I don't know, therefore aliens. Right? We don't know how the Egyptians built the pyramids, therefore there's room for doubt, therefore all ideas are equal, therefore aliens built the pyramids, therefore it's true that the aliens built the pyramids. And then all evidence can be construed in the light of aliens building pyramids. And that's just bullshit. First of all, we do have a pretty good grasp at this point on how people built the pyramids, and suggestions that the so-called ancient Egyptians, it was only a few thousand years ago, couldn't have done it means they were inferior to us. That's racist, so stop it. The appeal to ignorance essentially is the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Various people have said it various ways at various times. And uh, that just lands in my glandular system, Depends what you mean by evidence. Evidence is material that supports or conflicts with a proposition. In law, the prosecution brings evidence of guilt, and ideally, the defense spend their time breaking the evidence of guilt. Sometimes they bring exculpatory evidence. Under our system of law, we have to prove you guilty. You don't have to prove yourself innocent. But there's a certain amount of that goes on in court cases too. Exculpatory evidence, evidence that demonstrates our innocence. And the procedure is about both sides presenting evidence that supports their case. And then a jury or a judge decide the meaning of the totality of that evidence, and they make a decision about the truth or falsity of the prosecution's case. And in that aphorism, the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. The speaker tends to mean you can't prove a negative. You can't prove there is no God. This is the claim of the agnostic. Absence of evidence for God is not absolute proof of the absence of God. Okay, on its face that's true, but in fact, rhetorically, we've made two logical fallacies at once. The first is the appeal to ignorance. We just did that. And the second is equivocation. In an equivocating argument, we change the meaning of a word during the course of an argument. Right? So the statement is true as long as we all agree that evidence means what it means. Evidence is material. It's facts we can gather, things we can pick up and show each other that support one case or another. And the fact that there's nothing on earth we can pick up and go, this is suggestive of the existence of God, is not absolute proof of the evidence of God. Well, that's true. God could still exist. God could still exist. I choose to believe. I choose to believe. People want to get out of the argument and they say, well, it's not logical. It's not rational. I choose to believe my faith is good. Well, that one's complicated. Paul Tillich was not alone in suggesting that faith must necessarily be belief in the presence of doubt. Certainty is not faith. In this definition, right, in the non-fundamentalist view, faith is a choice to believe a thing, even when there's evidence that that belief is irrational in some way. That's faith. You could have faith in lots of things: God, your religion, humanity, yourself. And there might be evidence that it's irrational to believe those things, but those things are meaningful, they do work in your life, and so you maintain at least the pretense of the belief. This has always been totally alien to me. Maybe it's an autistic thing, but I don't choose to believe anything, at least not consciously. I'm not here going, well, the evidence is against me, but I'm going to believe that the less likely thing is true because I want to. Maybe that's something you non-autistic people can do with your frontal lobes. I don't really have those. Choosing to believe things contrary to evidence, that just seems somewhere between weird and bad. And like that's how we'd end up with Donald Trump for president or something. Incomprehensible. It would be different, of course, to act as if. Acting as if a thing were true without deciding the thing is true, but deciding that it would be good to behave as though it were true. One could think one's neighbors were evil users, takers, unlikely to return favors or care for other people, Or if they borrow your toaster, they bring the toaster back. And you could still decide that it is moral to behave as though they were good people, right? It says more about me than it does about them, whether I choose to loan them my snow shovel on a snowy day, right? And so I act as if they were good people deserving of care, even though not that deeply in my heart, in my brain, I know that they aren't. I know that they aren't. Sometimes we go around the neighborhood with our snow shovels and dig out people's cars from the snow, and we just act as if they deserve that. We make no inquiry as to whether it's true or not that they deserve that. Sometimes we praise people for qualities we wish they had in the hopes that they go on to develop those qualities. One could live as if the best version of their God was watching over them, because independent of the provable existence of that God, the moral system proposed by the religion resonates with that person. We're all at times in want or need of some guidance about what it means to be a good person, and religion might provide some of that guidance. Yeah, so that's my answer to, but I choose to believe it anyway, is, well, why? Do you really fundamentally believe in the literal truth claims, or do you believe it's good to behave in a certain way? And we could have a longer conversation about what those behaviors are. Now, this is fundamentally the difference between in-group inclusion religions and aspirational religions. In the in-group inclusion, you don't have to do anything good. You merely believe, and belief gets you into heaven. You are saved. You are good because you believe no matter what you do. And refer to the video on Ernest Becker and the denial of death as to why this would be a bad thing. And then your aspirational religions, those would be asking questions about, what does it mean to be good, right? This guy who lived a long time ago said, this is the way to be good. And that resonates with you, and so you go out and try to behave that way and be good. And do I need your religion? Do I need your religion in particular for that? I have a pretty healthy idea of what it means to be good, and I try to enact that good in the world every day as much as I can. Do I need your religion for that? Do I need threats of punishment and reward? Do I need validation? Well, those are personal questions. And external to all that probability stuff we've been talking today, my answer is just no. If it gives you meaning, that's fine. Go try and live that meaning. Leave me alone. Okay, bye. This has been The Black Pill. I don't know why you watch this crap.